Boker Tov. Today's daf is daf Tes Vav and Zbachim as we learn Frachenu Kol Beis Yisrael and Summa Sarva Shivya. We were discussing the concept of halacha shelo b'regel. What do we mean by that? That if you do halacha, the second step, shchita kabbalah halacha of zrika, rather halacha is the third step, second step, third step. And can you have, if a bad machshava when you do the halacha, does that ruin it? We say yes, because halacha, even though it isn't absolutely necessary to do, because you could do the avoda by shechting and doing the Kabbalah right next to the Mizbeach without stepping at all. Still, if you did step, that's still a avoda. And if you had a bad machshav shalol lishma, let's say by Chatos or Pesach, that would ruin it. But Rab Shimon said in the Mishnah, back on Yud Gimel, Rab Shimon said that he disagreed. Rab Shimon Omer machshav behilach Yomi, he says you could do. It's impossible to avoid shchita, Kabbalah, and zrika, but you could avoid the hilach by shechting it right next to Mizbeach. Then we had Rabbi Lazar at the end of the Mishnah said that it depends. If you walk in a place where you have to walk towards the Mizbeach, then a machshava ruins it. If you walked away from the Mizbeach where you didn't have to do that, then a machshava doesn't ruin it. But on the concept of halacha shelo b'regel, the Gemara said, Rabbi Yochanan at the end of the daf yesterday, and Rashi said, it's not the right thing to do. You're supposed to walk with it, even though you could do it next to Mizbeach, but you're supposed to walk with it. Now we'll see by a bird, if you shechted a bird could either be an ola or a chatas. There you do shecht it next to the mizbeach, and there is no holacha because you got to do it right there as the blood spurts out. But when it comes to a regular animal, you're supposed to walk with it. So Rashi said, and a machshava doesn't ruin it. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Then we had on this daf, on daf Tesvav, a few lines down, Itmar Omer Ula, about the fifth, sixth line, Rabbi Yochanan, Psula. If you do it without, Allah Regel, meaning where you didn't walk with it at all. It's you just stood next to Bech and you sprinkled, that's puzzle. And you can't even fix it. That's what the Gemara said, apparently. However, we're going to slug that up. Eisvei Rav Nachman Le'ula, Nishbach Menakli Al Ritzba. Now, when you do the shchita, you follow that the Kohen stands with a mizrak, a bowl, and he accepts the blood. That's called Kabbalah. Let's say some of the blood, as he was walking towards the Mizbeach, spilled on the ground, or the whole bowl spilled over. Boss, when he gathered it up, somebody was there to gather the liquid up and put it back. It's kosher. It's not kosher if the blood spilled directly from the neck of the animal, from the incision spot, onto the ground. That's no good, because the Kabbalah, the dam has to go right into a mizrak from the shchita. However, if the dam went into the mizrak, to the bowl, and then it spilled onto the ground, and he gathered up, it's kosher. So what do you see over here? Now, when you gathered it up, that was the holacha, meaning he did the shchita, he did the Kabbalah into the bowl. Then it's on his way to the mizbech, it spilled on the ground, he picked it up. Now, when it spilled on the ground, that wasn't a proper holacha. Presumably he was on the way to the mizbech and it spilled on the ground. That's a holacha shelo b'regel. He didn't walk with it, it just spilled by itself. So
it would have gone into the ground.
Oh, so no, not into the ground. The ground is all tiled. But you're bringing a good point. Maybe it didn't go any further. He says mashma, it's kosher. So it's kosher. It means that you could fix it. You just pick it up and go on with it. No. Maybe they're speaking about where it went backwards. In other words, you were on your way to Mizbeach. What is the holacha? You're taking the dam from the makom mashchita, from the place you shechted it, you accept the dam in the mizrak, and you go towards the mizbeach. Maybe you went backwards. Maybe the dam went backwards, so there wasn't holacha at all, but it went in reverse. So when you picked it up from there, you did a proper holacha. What do you mean? When you spilt the blood and the liquid spilling all over, it only goes backwards. It doesn't go forwards. Presume we're talking about a straight ground. So why would it only go back and not fun? So the Gemara says, maybe it was slanted. Maybe the tiles were slightly slanted, so it went backwards. So if it went backwards, it wasn't a holacha. You want to say if you did a holacha without walking, is that a holacha or not? Well, he said holacha shalberg is not a holacha. Fine. Can you fix it? So he said, no, you can't fix it. First, Itmar Ulam Rabbi Yochanan said, it's puzzle that ruins it. It's you can't fix it. here it's mashma, you could fix it because it's built on the ground, which wasn't the proper halacha, and you picked it up. He says, well, no, maybe it wasn't a halacha at all without regel. It just went backwards. Or it went into a hole in the ground, so it didn't proceed at all. Or the blood was thick, it was very dense, almost coagulated, so it didn't move. So the Gemara says, that's the case. That's the case. If it's spilled from the ground, from the kli. Remember, if it's spilled from the neck of the animal, that's no good because it's got to go right into a kli. If the blood spilled from the neck of the animal onto the ground, you can't pick it up and use it. It didn't go into the kli directly. Okay. But if it's spilled from the kli, then you could pick it up. So what are you saying now? Even though it went toward, presumably it means even if it went towards the mizbeach and you picked it up, it's okay. Even though that was a holacha shelo b'regel, when it's spilled onto the ground, you didn't walk with it; it just went ahead. She said, no, it went backwards. It fell into a hole. It was thick. The Tanas would tell you only that case. He says it's only kosher. It's only if it's built onto the ground, picked up. It's okay, but only in that case where it went backwards, or it was coagulated, or it went into a hole. And if that's the case, Adatani bidach pirkon, why did you say the case nishbach ala ritzba? Why did you tell me the case if it's spilled directly from the neck of the animal onto the ground? But when you gather it up as puzzle because you didn't have a right Kabbalah, liflik b'didei, make a machlokas, make a difference between when it fell from the kli, from the mizrak. Medvar mamurim kshias l'chutz. When do we say it's okay? If it's spilled from the mizrak onto the ground and you picked it up, if it went backwards, but if it went forwards, it would be puzzle because it's a loch shlo b'regel. Elamai, you can't say that that's what we're talking about over here. Meaning, if it's spilled from the clean, you picked it up, it's okay either way because you picked it up and you continued on, even though there was some holacha shlo b'regel there. That doesn't ruin it. In other words, it's not a proper holacha. You still have to take it forward, like we said. And a bad machshava wouldn't help it if while it was a loch shel b'regel and it's not kosher to do the way. But you could fix it up tiftis akasha on ulam Rabbi Yochanan. And the bottom line is you could fix it.
You do the shechita and the ground comes out.
Yeah,
Some of it is going to fall on the ground.
that's right. That you can't use that blood. That blood is gone. That's garbage. No, it doesn't have to be just enough to sprinkle it on the mizbeach. There's no specific.
So in every case, you can have it.
That's right. That's right. We'll see other cases where let's say he lost all the blood on the way to the mizbeach, and the whole thing spilled out, and he couldn't gather it up. I mean, think about it. You spilled water on the ground or something like that. It's very hard to pick it up. And let's say he couldn't. If there's more dam in the neck of the animal, like what we call lifeblood, not blood. If there's a certain amount of blood in the animal or the human being, presumably also, the man's dead already, but the animal's dead. But there's still some blood in there. That's called that's not we're talking about lifeblood. The lifeblood, if there's still lifeblood, and he can go back and get some more. There's no minimum shiur, just enough you have to sprinkle. Okay, so we're saying then that you could fix it. If there was a loch shel b'regel, it's not a proper loch, but you can fix it. Itmar. Holocha shel b'regel, now we're saying it's a machlokas Reb Shimon Rabbanan. Now we want to say this, listen, holocha shel b'regel, where you did the holocha without walking. You just sprinkled it with your hand. That was the holocha towards the mizbeach. Right? Holocha shelo b'regel is a machlokes Reb Shimon Rabbanan. Why? What was the Reb Shimon said? Reb Shimon, the Mishnah said that you could, if you had a bad machshava during holocha, that doesn't ruin it because you don't even have to do holocha. You could just shecht next to the mizbeach, and then you're even in holocha. So he says it's a machlokes Reb Rabbanan. What do you mean? But holocha Rabbasi. Now Rabbasi means when you actually walked. You had to walk some distance to the mizbeach, whether it's a few steps or 10 steps or whatever. If you had a bad machshava there. In other words, a loch shel b'regel is that it's possible if you had a bad machshava. Rashi says, the Masisin, yeah, right, but the lines are getting wide. Right before the lines get wide, Masisin, yeah, ilo, Reb Shimon lo avi avoda. Because that's not halacha. According to Reb Shimon, you don't need that, so therefore it wouldn't be possible. According to Rabbanan, it would be possible. Keep pligi balachas udrasi by a small halacha. Small halacha means there was no steps at all. You were right next to his back, and you just did it with your hand. Machlim Rabba, so they laughed at him in Eretz Yisrael and said, "What kind of pshat is that? You're saying that when you do a halacha without walking, in other words, just reaching over, you were standing next to his back." You're saying over there that's the machlokas from Shimon the Rabbanan. According to Reb Shimon, that's not a halacha, and therefore if you had a bad machshava, that wouldn't ruin it. Chatas oaf, which you have to shech next to the mizbeach. You can't walk; it doesn't go in the mizrach. Chatas oaf. How do? You do malika on you break the animal's neck from the back, and right there, and you sprinkle it. There's different ways to sprinkle chatas and oler, different sprinklings, different ways of cutting off the animal's head. But the malika, the base malika is there, and you stand there. Chatas of the psula b'machshava. They're bad machshava ruins it. Rab Shimon hechem mishkachasla. If you're saying according to Rab Shimon, by a small halacha, meaning where there was no walking at all, you were just standing there. That's he calls halacha zidrasi. According to Reb Shimon, that's not this a bad machshav wouldn't ruin it. So how do you have a bad machshav by chatas oaf? Chatas oaf the psul b'machshav Reb Shimon echem b'shkachasla. If he was thinking about a bad machshav, in other words, shalol lishma, before the dam came out of the neck of the bird. Salo klumu. That's not halacha at all. That's still in the blood. There was no halacha with the blood at all. The blood's still in the bird. Eat basar and afik dam. And if he think about it after the dam came out, it's done already. It's already done. So when could you have a bad machshava by chatasof according to Reb Shimon? If you say that Reb Shimon holds by a small halacha, meaning where there was no walking, there's no bad machshava wouldn't apply at all because you don't even have to walk with it. So my question. No, just from the neck of the animal. Exactly. So how would you have a bad machshava? We have a klal that you can have a bad machshava by chatas oaf also when you're sprinkling it. It says, how could you have a bad machshava? If it's before the dam left the neck of the bird, then it's nothing. It hasn't done anything yet. And if it's after it left already, the mitzvah was done already. When could he have a bad machshava? So the Gemara says, what's the problem? My kushya dilma. He's having a kavanah mid a parish from the time the blood left the neck of the animal of the bird until it hit the mizbeach, which is a second or two. He had a bad machshava then. Well, how do we know that it's necessary to have a clear mind, meaning no bad machshava during that time? Rav Yomi asked the following question of Zera. Let's say a Kohen, you need a Kohen to do that with his right hand. He's taking the bird and he's sprinkling on the mizbeach, right? There's different cases. Ola and Chatz is different. We'll talk about that later on. They're sprinkling and then they're squeezing it out on the wall of the mizbeach. But when he does that, let's say while he's doing it, he was maza, and then somehow came along nikta yado shalmaza. The sprinkler, that would be the Kohen, his hand got cut off. Some accident happened, and his hand got cut off. Actually, dam la'aver mizbeach before the dam got. In other words, he threw it. It was in the air. It was like a little arc, he threw it a little arc, and while he threw it, somehow his hand got dislodged, or his hand got cut off. Now he's puzzled. He's a balmum. What matzah halacha of Malay psula? Why is it puzzle? My time of he's of anasabina. You have to have sprinkling and putting it on the mizbeach. Got to do both from the time it left his hand to all the way till it reaches the mizbeach. Whether that's 2 seconds or 5 seconds or 10 seconds, it's got to be kosher. So you can have a bad machshava then. So what's your problem? You could have a bad machshava during that time. However, we still say at this point we're still saying that the halacha shlo b'regel, right, is a machlokes of Shem Rabbanan, and we said if it's a long walking, everybody agrees that it's puzzle because he had to walk there. They had bad machshava. It's no good. By a small one, meaning when he didn't walk at all, that's a machlokes of Shem Rabbanan. But Kiyasa Rapapa Rafuna, when they came from the yeshiva, they came from Shem Amri, Hayuchucha. This is why the people from Eretz Yisrael derided that memra. Why? They're not arguing by a big halacha. That was exactly the pshat in the Mishnah. What do we say in the Mishnah? The Mishnah back on Yigimel said that if you had a bad machshava during any time, right? During any time of Shchita Kabbalah Chazrika, Lishma, Shalo Lishma, Lo Lishma, Lishma, any kavan of Lo Lishma, that ruins it. Comes along Rav Shimon to say, well, when it comes to halacha, a bad machshav doesn't ruin it because you didn't really have to do the halacha. That means that we're talking about where you were doing the halacha, but you didn't have to do the halacha. Since you didn't have to do the halacha, therefore it doesn't ruin it. So he's talking about a case even where there was a halacha there, but he's saying since the halacha is not mandatory, it's not irreplaceable, you could do it without the halacha. So they're talking about a case where you are walking, but Rav Shimon says, you know what? If you had a bad machshav while you're walking towards the mizbeach with the dam, that doesn't ruin it because you didn't have to walk. You could have done it right next to the mizbeach. The pasla The girsa is not the low pasla. Rashi's girsa. Some have a girsa low pasla. Rashi takes out the word delo and he puts in the pasla. Ella ba'alacha sudrasi kol amala pligi the pasla. Why? Because that's unavoidable. In other words, when you're doing malik on a bird and you're sprinkling it down, you can't skip any process, right? You do the malika and you have to sprinkle it right there from the bird. There's nothing you can't avoid anything there. It's not like there's an extra pu'ula, I didn't have to walk. You're not walking, you're standing right there. So everybody agrees that a bad machshava there during the time that you sprinkle it would ruin it. The machlokas is by a large walk, meaning when you walk, you had to take a few steps or 100 steps, whatever it was. You took a bunch of steps from the Makom Shechita and the Kabbalah to the Mizbeach. That we hold like the Rabbanan, that if he had a bad machshava, ruins it. Rav Shimon says, no, since you didn't have to do that, that was skippable, that was non-mandatory, that was voluntary. You could have shechted it next to the Mizbeach and not walk. Therefore, the walking doesn't ruin it. If you had a bad machshava while you ruined it, doesn't ruin it. Rashi says, Rashi's going on the next case. Next case, we're 5 lines we're at the end of the first of the wide lines. All right, holicha zar. Now, a zar is not allowed to do halacha, right? We know that a zar is only allowed to shechita, not the other avodas. Zar took him as beach. Then a Kohen says, "What are you doing over here? You're not supposed to do that. Give it to me." He took it and took it back, and he walked back with it. That's 0 coin. And then the Kohen took it properly. There's a machlokas. Chadam or kosher. One says it's okay. Well, at the end, a Kohen did it. Chadam or puzzle says it's puzzle. Why? Because it's not fixable. You could fix it. In other words, once a zar did the halacha, that ruins it. If a zar, we had the other day, if a zar just stands there like an idiot, with like a ball, and he just stood there and held it for a second, he didn't move, that doesn't ruin it. He's just like put it on a rock, you put it on a stand, that's nothing. But over here, the zar took it. Marsav or efshel tikuna, marsav or tikuna. The one says that you can't fix it because once the zar carried it, it's no good. It's puzzle. Oh, let's say the other way around. Let's say ulicha Kohen. A Kohen took it to the mizbeach, v'echzira, he took it back. Then a zar took it. What would you say there? Amar Rav Shimi Barashi says, well, l'divrei amachshir, the one who said before that when a zar took it and the Kohen took it back and then the Kohen took it again, it's kosher. Over here would be puzzle. Why? Why did he say it's kosher? Because the second guy in the first case was the Kohen, right? The zar took it, the Kohen took it back, and then the Kohen took it. When the Kohen took it, he's kosher. You look at the second guy. So if you're machshir in the first case, you look at the second guy. Here, the second guy is a zar. So that would be puzzle. With divrei aposel, the one who puzzled it in the first case, where the zar took it, and then the Kohen took it, and he puzzled it. Why? Because the first guy was a zar. Machshir over here, the first guy was a Kohen. So that would be okay. Rava says no. Afla divrei aposel, even the one who said in the first case, where the zar took it first and then the Kohen took it, that's puzzle. Why? Because the first guy took it. Over here also, when the first guy was Kohen, it would also be puzzle. My time, because you still have to bring it. Even though the first guy was a Kohen over here, first guy was a Kohen, and that was kosher. But when he took it back afterwards, what was the second case? Second case was the Kohen took it and he took it back, and then the zar took it. Well, when the Kohen took it back and then the zar took it, you still have to bring it. So you still have to bring it, and if a zar took it, you have to bring it. In other words, he holds whether the zar took it first, it's puzzle, or the zar took it second, it's puzzle. Either way, the zar took it. And even if you say that the Kohen brought it in the second case, the Kohen brought it first, but now that it's back, it's no longer at the mizbeach. It has to be brought. My time, because you have to bring it. So therefore, it will be puzzle in both cases. Listen to this, Midifti. Rav Yirmiyah said the following thing: this idea that if you have to bring it, if you have to bring it, then it's and a zar brings it, that ruins it. In other words, whether a zar brought it first or a zar brought it second, that ruins it. Even if you say a Kohen brought it first, you say, well, it was done b'kashus, but now that it's not there anymore, you didn't do the zrika. The Kohen brought it and they took it back, and then the zar took it for some reason. So in that case, you still have to bring it. So if the zar took it, it's puzzle. But that shaila, if you have to bring it, does that a machlokas or not? So here he says the Hatzach Lamtui is actually machlokas Rabbi Lazar. It's not the Gifts of Rabbi Lazar. It's Rabbi Lazar Rabbanan in our Mishnah. Our Mishnah said at the end of the Mishnah. Remember, Reb Shimon said that if you don't halacha, a bad machshav halacha doesn't ruin it because you don't have to do the halacha. You could do the shechita and the kabbalah next to the mizbeach. Rabbi Lezer said, if you go in a place where you have to go towards the mizbeach, that ruins it. If you had a bad machshav, if you walked around and you took a spatzir, then it doesn't ruin it. The term Rabbi Lezer Amalch, makom shetzarach lahalach machshav paselas. If you go in a place where you have to go, then a machshav ruins it. Makom she'ein tzarach lahalach. If you go in a place where you don't have to go, ein machshav paselas. Okay, that's what Rabbi Lezer said in the Mishnah. Right? What's pshat in Rabbi Lezer? Hakol moda, both Rabbanan and Rabbi Lezer moda, that kiblu b'chutz v'chnisa b'fim. Here, chutz and fim does not mean outside the azar. Usually, chutz means outside the azar. That means inside. Here, it just means if you took it from far away and you brought it towards the mizbeach. Right? If I shechted it 100 steps away from the mizbeach and I have to take it to the mizbeach, that's a holacha. That's a carrying or a procession that's necessary. But if I was makabel down near the mizbeach and then I took it away from the mizbeach, okay, everybody agrees with that. Everybody agrees with that. That what's the machlokus over here between the Rabban? Ella shechniso, you brought it towards the mizbeach, then you took it out. Mar savar Rabbanan say, well, you still have to bring it, so therefore a bad machshava would ruin it. Or Mar savar lo kilach, and Rabbi Lezer says no. That's not kilach hatzarach lavoda. So I mean, since you could have stayed there originally, in other words, you had it there originally, you took it back out. That's not considered a hilach hatzarach lavoda, and therefore a bad machshava wouldn't ruin it there, according to Rabbi Lezer. Eisvei Abai has kasha, though he has a mefarish. The Rabbi Lezer doesn't agree with that. Rabbi Lezer doesn't say the way you attribute it to him right now. Rabbi Lezer malach makom shesarach la'ach machshava paselas. If you go in a place where you have to go towards the mizbeach, that ruins it. Keitzat kibbul b'chutz. If you accepted the dam far away, b'chnisa l'fnim, and you brought it towards the mizbeach, zeh shesarach lahalach. Kibbul l'fnim, if you accepted it near the mizbeach, v'otzil l'chutz, and you walk further away, zeh shein sarach lahalach, which we said before. Everybody agrees with. But then Rabbi Lezer goes on. Chazer b'chniso. Then after you took it back out, you brought it back in. That is necessary. Not like you said. You said that would be the shita of the Rabbanan, right? That would be necessary. That's a chlam tuyeh. And Rabbi Lezer wouldn't agree. Here you see Rabbi Lezer does agree. Well, Tanya. If you got proof, you got proof. If you got a fair shabraisa that Rabbi Lezer holds like way, then my argument that it's a machlokas, whether I'm tuyeh, when you have to take it back, meaning you already went near the mizbeach, but you took it back, and now you still have to take the mizbeach to be zarek the dam. Does that mean, is that a hilach shetzarach lahalach or not? You want to say it's machlokes Rabbi Lezer Rabbanan. We say even Rabbi Lezer would say that that's necessary. It's only not necessary if you're going backwards, like away from the mizbeach. So therefore, you can't prove anything. That's not the machlokas there. And apparently, the halacha is that whether a zar took it first or zar took it second, it's possible either way. Says the Mishnah, we finished the first parak, Baruch Hashem. Now we begin the second parak. If you were makabel the dam, here we're talking about shekiblu daman is the girsa zbachim shekiblu daman. Zbachim, kol zbachim shekibel daman. That we just changed it to singular instead of plural. Shekibel daman. If the dam was accepted by whom? The following people are puzzled to do Kabbalah. Remember. Anybody could do shchita, even a zar, a non-Kohen. Who are the people who are possible to do a Kohen? So he starts up, zar, a non-Kohen. Onain, a person who had a death in the family that day and hasn't buried him yet. Tful Yom, a person who was tamei, went to the mikveh, but he hasn't waited for shkia yet. Mechusik Kippurim, if even a person who was tamei and went to the mikveh and waited for shkia, but he's a metzora or a zav and he has to bring a carbon the next day and he hasn't brought his carbon yet, all these people are prohibited from doing the avodah. Obviously, we're talking about even a Kohen. If he's a Zar, he's known, might be the greatest Talmud Chacham and the most pure person in the world, but if he's not a Kohen, he can't do the Avodah. The other ones we're speaking about are even if they're a Kohen. Kohen who's an Onein, it's full Yom, Mechusik Kippurim, Mechusik Begadim, if he doesn't have all his clothes. Meaning, a Kohen head yod has to have 4 Begadim, a Kohen Gadol has to have 8. If they have less than the amounts necessary, that invalidates them, or more. Shaloch Arsidaim, if he didn't wash his hands and feet from the Kior in the Azara. Orel, what's an Orel? A person who didn't have a circumcision. Why would a Kohen be there without a circumcision? If his brothers were hemophiliacs and died after doing a bris, it's not his fault, but can't do a voda. Tamei if he's tamei at all. Yosef if he's sitting, or Omer Agav Kalim, he has to have what we call yachef, he has to be barefoot on the tiles of the azar, on the zara floor. Can't have tongs or flip-flops or shoes or sneakers or whatever. He can't wear any shoes. Or standing on an animal. On somebody else's feet. He got to have his feet have to touch the floor directly. All this all those things are puzzle, right? Any of those feet, all those things puzzles it. If they recover dam, that ruins it. Kibbutz b'smol, if you accept the dam in your left hand, that also puzzles. Reb Shimon says in the left hand is okay. The zrika, everybody agrees, has to be done with the right hand or the right finger in the case of the chatas where you're smearing the blood on the four corners of the mizbeach, as we'll see. But the Kabbalah, Tanakam, like we hold that small is no good. Reb Shimon says it's kosher. Where do we know? How do we know that a zar? Mar says zar minah. How do we know that a zar cannot do this avodah? The Kabbalah. Where to get it from? The Tani Levi pasuk says Dabrel el Aaron vel banav leimor. This is a pasuk in Vayikra Chaf Beis. Vayidaber Hashem Moshe Medaber el Aaron vel banav. Speak to Aaron and his sons and tells them v'yinozru. They should separate themselves. Mikach b'nei Yisrael v'lo yachalu. They shouldn't profane Kachi Hashem Mikashanim. When pasuk goes on, when a Kohen is tamei, he should separate himself from the kachim of b'nei Yisrael. Now, what do you mean the kachim of b'nei Yisrael? It says B'nei Yisrael. What do you mean b'nei Yisrael? A Kohen who's tamei cannot do the avoda on a carbon of b'nei Yisrael as excluding b'nos Yisrael. What do you mean? You should separate yourself and don't do the kachim of the sons of Israel, right? What does it say? To exclude if they're tamei, if the Kohen's tamei, he could officiate at the carbon of a woman. Carbon nashim b'tumah carve. Can you bring it? Of course not. He can't just if he's just because it's the carbon of a woman doesn't mean that the Kohen who's tamei could bring the carbon. Elamut of a club maybe means to exclude. Then I'll be kachavim. If he is if a guy could send the carbon in. He doesn't have nesachim, etc. But he could send the carbon in. He can mail it in. If he brings in a carbon, maybe there a Kohen could do the avoda while the Kohen is tamei. Hashta tzitz lo maratza. Remember, there's the tzitz that the Kohen Gadol wears as maratza for tumah that happened to the carbon, right? So hashta tzitz is lo maratza on a carbon of a goy. Domar mar uvav kechavim. They mishagim mezid whether he's tamei, whether the Kohen is officiating was tamei, was shogig or mezid. Lo hirtza is not maratza at all. It does not make it acceptable at all. In other words, it's maratza. So, but tumah carv, do you think if the tzitz is not maratza for tumah, do you think he could bring it when he himself is tameh? And Rashi says, "Betumah karav." There's betumah segiv karvet mia. V'lo afilu carbon yachid. The Yisrael lo nidchas. Even carbon of a yachid, Yisrael is not nidchas if the Kohen is tameh. So we have a rule that tumah hoter but sibor. If it's a carbon sibor, then you could bring it even if the Kohen is tameh, etc. If all the Kohen are tameh, you could bring it anyway. But not of a yachid, so certainly not that of a goy. Pasuk means this. You have to put a comma in there. It says v'yinazru, separate yourselves when you're tamei, you kohanim, separate yourselves mikachim b'nei Yisrael v'lo yochalu, and don't profane it. So darshans are like this: v'yinazru mikache, comma. They should stay away from the kachim when they are tamei. Take a look in Rashi in the third of the wide lines. V'yinazru mikache yisrachku b'tumei kol kachim. From when you're tamei Kohen, Mr. Cohen, stay away from karbonos when you are tamei. Then b'nei Yisrael lo yichalu. The Didashim said that way, right? B'nei Yisrael lo yichalu. The zarim, b'nei Yisrael who are zarim, not going on the karbonos of b'nei Yisrael, excluding the carbon of B'nai Yisrael, excluding carbon of a non-Jew. That doesn't make sense. You have to dash this way. B'nei Yisrael lo yichalu. B'nei Yisrael shouldn't do the avoda because they should hazarim afheminos. They should also stay away, even though they're not tamei, because he's b'kedei shel yichalu. Limit al zor shavid chil as a kachim paslam. He learns from this word. B'nei Yisrael v'lo yichal. That's how we know that a zor is not allowed to do any of the avoda except for shchita, because as we said, shchita is not considered a sheirut, even though it is considered avoda, but it's a semi avoda. B'nei Yisrael v'lo yichal. So that's one drasha. It's a little bit hard to wait because you got to stick a comma in there, right? The Rebbe Shmuel Tani says, no, I'll have a kavachomer. I'll tell you kavachomer how I know that a zor cannot do the avoda, including Kabbalah Saddam. Why? Mi Balmum. A Balmum is also forbidden to do the avoda. Pasuk says, Achel parochas lo yava, a Kohen who's a Balmum, who has a blemish, right? Not his fault. He has a permanent blemish. There's a Belam Mizbeach lo yigash he's not allowed to approach Mizbeach ki mumbo. Okay, so kal v'chom balmum. Ma balmum, she'ochel, maracha balmum, who's allowed to eat. He's allowed to eat karbonos, even kachikachim. Well, like what? Like chatas. What are the kachikachim which are eaten? A mincha, a chatas, and an oshim. And all is totally burnt, right? But the three that are kachim that are eaten can only be eaten by zichrei kun, as we say every day in karbonos, right? We say that every day they ezo makoman can only be eaten by a kohen, male kohen. But a malmum, even though he can't officiate, he can't do the avod, he can't do Kabbalah Chazrika, but he could eat it. So Mabamum Sha'ochel, he's allowed to eat kachikachim im avad, but if he did the avoda chilo, he profanes it. Zor she'enoch, Zor's not allowed to eat that. And it didn't shema v'chil. Certainly, if he did the avoda, he would profane it. So Malabamum, yeah, Malabamum is different. Shekain osabo karv makom. Malabamum is different. Why? Because there, the karv, the thing that you're bringing, the thing that you're offering, the animal, if it is a balmum, it's also no good. Not only is the coin no good, if he's a balmum, you can't offer a sacrifice also. So balmum is different because the karav, the thing that you're bringing, the karav is like the makriv, like the kohen who's officiating. Tameh, so look at, right? So maybe you can't learn from balmum. Look at tameh. By tameh, we don't say that. An animal, it's alive, is never tameh. The only kind of animal, the only animals that are alive that are tameh are Jewish human beings. Everybody else, all other human beings and all animals are not tameh. So by tameh, look at tameh. Only the person officiating is tameh is also, but not the thing that's being brought. So you can learn it from there. Maracha tameh, right? Maracha tameh, who cannot offer the avoda, right? But the thing that's being offered is not tameh. So you look at you see that balmum is a problem with that, but tameh is not. Mala tameh shekei metame. Tameh is different though, that it has the stringency that it's metame others, that a kohen who's tameh is metame the food that he touches once it's already geshachten. So balmum yochiach, balmum is not metame. Balmum and tameh each have a different characteristic. What's the common denominator? Shemuzharan, that they are forbidden from doing the avodah. As we said, the Balmum says la yigashbo, and the Kohen says yinazru. The imavdu, and if they did the avodah, profanes it. Afan nizar shumuzar the chil. So I'll bring also said they'll learn from azar is learned from the combination of a Kohen tameh and a Kohen Balmum. That from the combination of them, that if they did the avodah, they profaned it the same way. Azar shouldn't do the. I'll learn also that azar who's commanded not to do the avodah if he didn't. So how do we know Manon's Musar? But how do we know that Azar is Musar? If you're not learning it out from that pasuk, if you're learning from Vinazru Chil Begufis, that pasuk Vinazru Mikashim Israel V'lo Yechalu, it says if you're learning it based now you're not learning it based on the pasuk, you're learning it based on a Kal V'chomer and then a Ma'atzad, a Tzad Shava of tameh, a kohen tameh, and a kohen balmum. You're not basing on the pasuk. Ella mizar lo yikrav aleichem. There's a different pasuk in Bameh which says azar should not come near to do the avoda. All right, Gemara can ask kasha on that. Ekel will ask kashas on that. This Gemara will continue some more. Mitzvah
Non-Jew Azar.
A non-Jew is puzzled to the is puzzled for everything. It's worse than Azar. He's not Jewish, so he can't do anything.